Now let's get some political reaction. Joining me from Toronto, the Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Omar Alghabra. Nice to see you. From Winnipeg, the Conservative Defence critic, James Bezan. Hello. And on Skype, back again from the NDP caucus in Montebello, round two, Foreign Affairs critic, Hélène Lavardière. Good to see everybody. Omar Alghabra, I'm going to start with you. We have heard now from the Office of the Defence Minister that Canada was not, in fact, invited to this meeting. I don't know if you know why we've been left out or how Canadians should read that.
Hi, Rosie. It's good to be with you. Look, this meeting with these five countries have happened in the past, and these five countries frequently meet. This is the first time I think they're meeting at a minister's level. Everybody there and knows Canada's commitment as a firm partner in the coalition in combating ISIL, and the minister is going to be attending a meeting organized by the Secretary of Defense, the U.S. Secretary of Defense, on February 11th for coalition partners. So everybody knows Canada's commitment. This was a spontaneous meeting with these five countries that they've met before at an official level, and they're meeting again at a minister's level. Okay. So I wouldn't read too much into it.
Okay, I mean, to be fair, the meeting that Minister Sajjan is having with the Defense Secretary Ashton Carter is on the fringes of NATO. Of course, we are a member of NATO, so we wouldn't be left out of that kind of meeting. So the government doesn't feel in any way snubbed that we've been left out of with what the press release itself calls the major contributors to the fight against ISIS.
Just let me clarify, that meeting on the fringe of NATO is a meeting that is organized by Secretary Ash for the coalition partners, and I guess he picked the timing knowing that many of these ministers will be at NATO's meeting in Brussels. So, but it is a meeting organized for coalition partners who are involved in combating ISIL. Like I mentioned, this was a regular meeting these five countries hold, this last-minute addition where they've invited the ministers, but it's not that Canada was not part of that five countries.
So seven to be clear, just if you include the U.S. and France, it's seven countries, and that's fine. And I'm not saying we should be there or shouldn't be there. I'm trying to understand why some people are there and why we aren't there. For instance, Italy is attending. The United Kingdom is attending. Perhaps not a surprise given their participation in the coalition. But let me just go around the table and get everybody else's perspective on this. James Bezan, do you think that this is a problem that we haven't been invited? Do you think that if the government had said, here's what we're going to do, come March, we would be at this table? Or is this, as Omar Alghabra says, this is just the principal members of this coalition, and under your government, we wouldn't be there either?
No, I think it's actually a very unfortunate event that Canada wasn't invited. And, you know, despite the rhetoric that we hear coming from the government and Prime Minister Trudeau that, you know, we're going to be a major player now on the world stage, well, we're not a major player because of the indecision and incoherent strategy that we have going forward in the war against ISIS. You know, it does come down to, if we're going to be serious, and if you look at some of the comments that were made last week by retired Major General Fraser, he said, if we're not going to be in the fight, we're not going to be at the table. And this is the first indication that we haven't been a partner, or maybe not a trusted partner going forward. And, you know, there's going to be some very significant conversations taking place, and it'd be perfect if Canada was there, if we were going to be serious about actually taking the fight to ISIS, as Minister Dehaan said over the weekend after the horrific attacks in both Jakarta and in Burkina Faso, but, you know, where Canadians lost their lives. If we're actually going to take the fight to ISIS, then we should be at these meetings. We should be laying out a clear and coherent strategy. And,
what about
as the opposition, we've always said the Jets need to stay in the fight.
Well, okay, but what about the fact that, as Omar Alghabra points out, the minister is going to meet with the Secretary Carter on the fringes of the NATO meeting. They have other conversations. These conversations are taking place as time goes on.
Right, and as you know, the NATO discussions have both a political side and a defense side that takes place at that level of meetings all the time. But I think where we have this level of meeting where it's not just military planners, it's not just high-level diplomats and deputy ministers. We actually have ministers and secretaries of defense meeting together to talk about the strategy, how they're going to go forward, whether or not the Kurdish Peshmerga and the Iraqi security forces are battle hardened and can take the fight as boots on the ground, and how they plan to go forward with that. If we're going to be committing a larger training force, then we need to know, Rosie, exactly what those plans are, and we should be at the table having this discussion. And of course, one of the things they're going to be talking about is Russia's involvement, and how there has been concern about the increasing number of civilian casualties because of Russian airstrikes.
Okay.
So all these things are going to be talked about, and Canada's going to be absent, and I think that's a shame.
Hélène Laverdière, I know the NDP doesn't support the bombing mission, but do you have any concerns around us not, being at the table with 7 other countries discussing sort of next steps?
Well, I think my main concern, not being at the table may reflect both on the current government and on the past government also. But that's an issue I leave aside for the moment, because I think my biggest concern right now is the plan. What is the plan? When are we going to withdraw our fighter jets, and what exactly are we going to do? There are talks of this expanded training mission. We've seen in the past that the training mission also included fighting. We even had a soldier who died at the front line. So what exactly, and Prime Minister Trudeau said that it was very important to separate those things. So we want to know what's the plan and what's going to be done also to curb funding for these groups, because as we can see, there are many who are involved right now all around the world, and also to prevent further radicalization. So we need a detailed plan now.
Yeah, Omar Alghabra, I mean, do you think that this is a meeting that happens and we were never invited because we've never been considered a major contributor to the fight against ISIS?
No, I don't think. I think this is just those 5 countries, in addition to invitation of France and U.S., are typical. Like I said, this was not an. It was, even though it was spontaneously, they've raised the level to ministers level, but these countries have frequently met discussing these issues in the past. It was not a habit of inviting Canada or any other country. And I wouldn't read too much into it. But let me emphasize, I think no one questions Minister Sajjan's commitment to Canada's role in combating ISIL. He had just come back from the region. He'd visited the region multiple times. He had just been in Iraq. In fact, he went to the front line. He's discussing our role with many stakeholders, with the countries on the ground, and with consulting with Canadians and other stakeholders on what it is that we can do. And we need to be thoughtful. Canadians expect their government to be thoughtful and effective in what we're doing, and we are committed to the long-term, multi-pronged approach in combating ISIL.
But then haven't you just made a really good argument for being at this kind of meeting? I mean, wouldn't you want to be sitting there with all the people that are doing the heavy lifting to decide, well, where can we fill in the gaps?
I am not suggesting that being at the meeting is a bad thing. I'm just saying that not being invited to the meeting is it didn't come as a surprise.
Right.
And these 5 countries have frequently met, and in the past they haven't invited other countries. So I'm not saying it would be a bad thing if we were at that meeting, but I'm just saying it's not a surprise that we're not invited.
Okay, well, James Bezan, does it not then confirm that what your government committed to doing wasn't actually that significant? We weren't really at the table anyway.
No, that's not a fact at all, Rosie. I think if you look at it, it's because of the incoherent messaging that we've been hearing from the Liberals. Dion says one thing, Sajjan says another. Minister Sajjan is a decorated veteran of the Afghanistan War and the Canadian Armed Forces, and I hope that he takes his leadership skills and his knowledge of the battle on the ground and really does present a strong case to Cabinet this week as they're meeting in St. Andrews, and makes the case that we need to be in this battle with our air combat mission, that we need to have a robust training mission as well with our special operation forces. And this is what this meeting is all about, is how well are the Kurdish Peshmerga and the Iraqi security forces prepared to deal with the battle on the ground as air bombing continues to soften up ISIS fighting positions across the region. So it does come down to that we should be at this meeting. We have 69 Special Operation Forces members who have done a great job in training the Kurdish Peshmerga, as well as the great work that's been done by the Royal Canadian Air Force. Okay, I got to leave it there. I apologize, we're running out of time. Omar Alghabra, James Bezan, Hélène Laverdière, good to speak with you all. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Rosie.
Thank you.
Talk again.